There literally may be 10,000 different ways that people will teach you to chip. Some people say on the backswing, we want to make sure that the club head gets outside the hands. Some people say it's on the hands. Some people say to go ahead and release your wrist to be able to use the bounce or engage the bounce. You'll see open-faced pitching methods and chipping methods. You'll see square-faced pitching methods and chipping methods at address. You get all this information and you're like, how in the heck do I know what's going on? Well, there may be a lot of ways to do it, but there's one way that I feel like is the absolute simplest way. And it's very similar to what we talk about, or what you've heard Phil Mickelson talk about with the hinge and hold method. I don't really like the idea of hold. I like to think of it being a straight line as we're coming through. So let me go over what I mean by this. If I set up to this little pitch shot here, when I come through impact, I want to make sure that my hands don't overtake my club head doesn't overtake my hands. I don't want my left wrist really breaking down a ton as it's happening. It's not saying when you watch PGA Tour players, you'll see sometimes that they do these shots where they're really talking about engaging the bounce. And all engaging the bounce means is this angle on the bottom of the club. If I open the face, it creates more bounce. And as I release the hands, it creates more bounce. This gets the ball to slide on the turf very easily. And when you watch a lot of PGA Tour players, that's exactly what they're doing. You don't always see them with a lot of shaft lean and keeping that angle coming all the way on through. The reason is PGA Tour greens are lightning fast and they're firm. So if you're hitting a normal flighted shot that comes out at a normal trajectory and it has a normal amount of spin on it, it's going to be hard to get it to stop on those lightning fast greens, especially when the pins are tucked. And a lot of times you'll see them short-sided, meaning that they don't have very much green to stop it on. Well, the reason they're doing that type of shot, that they're trying to say engage the bounce, use the bounce, all that kind of stuff, is because the greens are lightning fast and they're firm and they're short-sided. So when you have that kind of situation, you have to open the face a lot. You have to go ahead and engage the bounce and let these hands release to get the ball to launch higher. So if I'm doing a shot kind of similar to that, I'm going to launch this ball a lot higher. It didn't pick it up on my flight scope here because it's too short of a shot. But I'm going to launch the ball a lot higher, meaning that if I'm hitting this ball from here, when it hit the screen, it was way up here somewhere. So I'm really not getting that leading edge toward the turf. I'm throwing the wrist a little bit. I'm engaging the bounce. I'm getting these really high, soft spin shots. Now that's perfectly good. There's nothing wrong with that technique. And when you see pros do that on TV, you think, wow. I mean, a lot of those shots, they land up there and have a ton of spin on them. And it's all good and great. If you're on a perfectly tight lie from the fairway and you're short-sided and you have to get it up high and have a ton of spin on it, I'd recommend doing that. Unfortunately, it's a heck of a lot tougher than just a standard pitch and chip shot technique. You see, that's an advanced technique. These are some really good players. And I'll tell you what, if you open the face, release the hands, and you happen to be a little too high on the ball, that ball is going to skull right across the green. You're going to make an absolute fool out of yourself. Or if you chunk it a little bit, it's going to be an absolute disaster. And because I'm releasing the club, it makes it a little easier for a lot of players to start chunking the ball when they're doing that. So you hear all this talk about engage the bounce, use the hands, get that lofted up there. Again, fantastic shot. If you're playing on the PGA Tour this week, you might want to turn off this video and go practice, but that's a perfectly good shot for you. For the recreational golfer, for the guy that's just going out this weekend and just doesn't want to chunk them, just wants to hit them consistent, that is not the easiest way to do it. The easiest way to do it, in my opinion, is to set up this shot, get a little bit of wrist hinge in the backswing. So I don't mind if you go fairly straight back or you get a little bit of hinge, but I'm getting a little bit of wrist set, and then as I come through, I'm rotating, and I'm not letting this club shaft overtake my hand. So if I take a line from my lead arm and draw it down there, I don't want to see the club on this side of my arms. I want it to be in a dead straight line. I also don't want to see it way back here like this, held off. See, if I hold off, then I'm leaning the shaft forward, I'm getting this leading edge closer to the ground, and it's easy to chunk. So if I'm trying to do this, and I'm thinking hinge and hold like that, that's going to make it easy to chunk, and the balls are going to come out very low and hot. Tough to get your distance right, tough to keep from chunking it. That's a real low nipper type shot. Not your standard, not the easiest. If I'm doing this, like we just talked about, and I'm letting it fold back up, and now my left arm to the club is like that, great if you're short-sided, you have to hit high with a lot of spin, great if you're on tour, But for the regular golfer, that's a tough one to get down too. The best way to do it is to simply go back and keep your momentum going forward so that your left arm and the club shaft are straight in a line together. Now the right way to do this with the technique, or the easiest way, mistake I see is people get their stance way too wide and now we start moving around on it. I like to go ahead and get the ankles together. If I put both feet square, you'll see that golf ball is on my lead foot. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the heel of my lead foot on the ground and I'm going to rotate this lead foot open a little bit. So you'll see it looks like there's 6 inches between my feet, but if you look at my heels, there's about an inch between them. That's a great little way to set up for a basic pitch shot. Now from there, let's make it as easy as possible. Let's get a little bit of bounce. We don't want that leading edge digging into the ground, so let's open the face a few degrees. So just like this, a few degrees open. Now when you open the face like that, if I swing straight and do nothing else, the ball's going to go slightly to the right. If you cut your pitch shots a little bit, meaning that I'm coming slightly across the ball, that makes it even easier to be consistent with my contact. That's why you're hearing, like we talked about in the very beginning of this video, people are talking about getting the club head outside your hands. You see, what I find sometimes, we've been taught to keep this club head outside of our hands, but we don't realize that these pros are cutting the ball slightly when they use that technique. If I go outside my hands and I try to draw the ball, or I try to hit it straight, all of a sudden it's like a lot of rerouting, a lot of manipulation. So my club head's going to be slightly outside my hands, but just realize that I'm cutting it slightly as I'm doing that. And then as I set up to here, again, I don't mind if you set the club a little on the way back. I don't mind if you keep it fairly straight like Steve Stricker. Whatever technique you want to do, I'm okay. I haven't found that that makes a ton of difference. There's great pitchers that have a little set. There's great pitchers that are fairly wide with the club head. Personally, I like to stay fairly wide. And then as I come through, all I'm doing is rotating my body together to keep this in a straight line. If my body stops, so if I come to here and I'm trying to go all rock the shoulders upper body, what ends up happening is I can only get to about here and then I have to fold up. So it looks something more like this, right? If I rotate the body, now I can keep this in a straight line. So ball off the lead ankle, a little open with the foot. I'm playing a very slight cut shot here, so my club will be outside my hands, and then I'm just finishing with that in a straight line. And man, it is easy to hit nice, clean little pitch shots. Notice when I'm doing this, I'm keeping my weight roughly on this lead ankle the entire time. So I'm not feeling like I'm getting big weight shift. I'm not feeling like it's on my right foot. I'm just over that lead foot, and it's almost like this is my pivot point, and I'm just rotating around that single pivot. So if I keep my weight in the same spot, it keeps my low point in the same spot, and man, does it make things a lot easier. There we go. In my opinion, the easiest way to pitch a golf ball. One last time here, I want you to hold your finish, check that left arm to make sure it's a nice straight line. There we go. That looks perfect. I hit that really nice and solid. Now you may be wondering, that's great for the technique, but how are pros getting it to go 30 yards right on the button, and then 40, 50, 60? How do they get those distances down? Well, I like to teach a backswing system that's going to automatically ingrain you how to get the right distances. So if I want to hit it 30 yards, it's going to go 30. If I want to hit it 70, it's going to go 70 or 50 or whatever the number is. The trick with this is that most people teach the position to get in, but they don't teach the missing piece here, which I'll go over in this video. So I want to play a preview of that video here in a second. Just go ahead and click on it on your screen, click on the card, click on the video that you see over here, and I'm going to show you that video so that you can see the real technique, what we should be doing to be able to nail in those distances. Best of luck. Let's go ahead and get started.
Well, I used to actually practice a lot in high school. This is one of my favorite things to do. I had a strip mowed down the back of my yard where I took the lawnmower. My parents probably hated this because I mowed it down to like half-inch turf in the back of the yard because we lived on a farm, and I would set buckets or towels along this, and I would try to set them at those distances that I knew. And maybe I knew my 56 degree went right at 65 yards. So I'd set a bucket 65 yards away, and I would go ahead and do my 9 o'clock swing, and I would try to fly it right into the bucket. And I'd get to where I could tell for sure if I was going to be a couple yards short or a couple yards long just because it gets so ingrained when you get the rhythm and the finish the same every time. We can use different length backswings to control the distance of our wedge shots. So for example, if we imagine that I'm a clock and 6 o'clock is directly down, my wedge would be at 6 o'clock, or my arms would be at 6 o'clock, I can go back to a 7:30 swing and I can have the same finish and hit at a certain distance, or I can go back to 9 or 10:30 and swing through to the same distance, and that's going to control, or the same finish point, and that's going to control the distance that my wedge shots are going to fly in the air. And I've got to keep that rhythm and that tempo very, very consistent. If I vary my tempos, I can hit at all kinds of different distances. So for example, I could have a real quick tempo 7:30 swing and probably hit this 90 yards. I could have a, maybe not really that far, probably 50 or 60 yards. I could have a very slow tempo 7:30 swing and hit half that distance. So I've got to get my distance the same. I've got to get my rhythm the same. That's the real key to it. And the second piece on there